To get a more beautiful app, it would be a good start to have a white background and maybe not this reddish text with the double yellow underline. And we only get this here because I'm outputting the text widget in the material app, and that is enough to bring something onto the screen, but it has no default stylings for our mobile app. It does not have any background or any app bar because for Flutter, you have to configure that all manually. Keep in mind that Flutter controls the entire UI. All the pixels on the screen are controlled by your Flutter app in the end, by the Flutter framework. It does not take an existing mobile app and just mix in some widgets or some components. It controls the entire app instead. And therefore, you also have to give clear instructions about every detail. What should be the background color? Should there be an app bar? And to do that, there is a little helper widget which you can use. And I'll replace my text widget here with it, and that's Scaffold. Now, Scaffold is yet another widget which is baked into Material Dart. It's made available there, and Scaffold has the job of creating a base page design for, well, your app. So it will give you a basic design and structure and color scheme or coloring for, well, giving you a UI that looks more like a regular mobile app page. Scaffold also has a couple of named arguments, and you can always hit Control Space to get some auto-completion in the IDE and get a list of the named arguments that are supported. And here you can also cycle through with the arrow keys to get some help and some explanation of what each of these named arguments does. Now, there are tons of arguments, and typically you only use a few of them for each widget you're creating. And here, for example, we could add an app bar and then a body. Body is basically the main content of the page, and the app bar, as the name suggests, is the bar at the top. So here we can add app bar, and now again, app bar, if we hover over that, takes a preferred size widget. Now, what's a preferred size widget? Well, it's a special kind of widget, you could say. You could build it on your own, but since the app bar is such a typical and specific thing in any application, you can simply pass in a pre-built widget, which is also named app bar. App bar, again, is a widget provided by Material Dart. And as always, all widgets are classes. So here we are instantiating a class, but this is a class which extends stateless or stateful widget in the end. An app bar, then again, takes some configuration. So here, if I hit Control Space whilst being within the parentheses with my cursor, I get some explanation on what I can pass here. And you can pass a bunch here. You can pass actions, which would be buttons in your app bar. You can pass some bottom tabs if you want to add some tabs in there. You can change the background color, but for now I only want to set my title. Title is a named argument that allows me to set a title for this page. And here we could add my first app as a title. However, title does not take some text, but if we have a look at it, title actually takes a widget. And you can always hover over that to see what goes in there. So it takes a widget, not some text, but it takes the text widget. You know, this could be confusing, but the text widget is not some plain text, but it is actually a widget which takes some plain text, which takes a string, therefore, as a positional first argument, and then it outputs some text on the screen, the text we're passing in here. But text is a widget, not the plain text. This here with the quotes, that is plain text. So now I'm passing my text widget, which in turn takes that plain text, as a widget for the title argument in my app bar widget. And we already see a bunch of widgets here, and whilst this can be confusing initially, this is how Flutter works. You compose your user interface by mixing multiple widgets together. So here we have our overall app widget, which then uses a scaffold widget to get some basic page styling, which then has an app bar widget for its app bar, which then takes a text widget. Now, of course, we might not just want an app bar here, but also a body. So we can add body here. Now that's on the scaffold widget, so make sure you are adding this on the right level, outside of the app bar and outside of the text widget arguments, but on the scaffold arguments. Here we can add body, and the body here, again, could be our text, like, this is my default text. Now, one recommendation I have here, always add a comma after closing parentheses. because this will allow you to auto-format this in a very readable way. That's just a feature the Flutter extension for Visual Studio Code and also for Android Studio offers. You can format your document with a certain key binding, and you can find that if you go to Keyboard Shortcuts, and there you search for Format Document in Visual Studio Code. Then you should find a key binding, which you can also change if you're not happy with the default. With that key binding, if you press that, you auto-format your code to be a bit more readable, and with these trailing commas at the end of every line, Flutter is able to format this nicer. If I would remove this comma after my body argument here, you see now it formats this a bit more unstructured, and for short snippets like this is fine, but the longer your widget trees get, the easier and nicer it is to read this with these trailing commas, which improve the auto-formatting. But that's just a tiny hint for writing clean code. So with that, we finished our scaffold widget, which we didn't create ourselves, but which is provided by Flutter, and we passed an app bar and a body. And now if we save this, it should automatically rebuild and hot reload your application. Hot reload means that it didn't need to restart the app, which means it keeps the current state. If we changed any data in there, it wouldn't restart and overwrite that. Instead, it keeps the app as it was and just injects our new code into it, which is some magic managed by Flutter during development. And therefore, if we go back, now this looks way better. Instead of that ugly hello, which was red with a black default, with a black background, we now have our nicer page look here with an app bar, with a little drop shadow, with a blue background, with our title that automatically has a color that contrasts against the background. And then here we have the "this is my default text, which we output in the body, so in the main area of this page. And this is how we build Flutter apps, how we work with these widget trees, and how we can also structure our app here in code. And that is what I meant when I mentioned in the first section that with Flutter and Dart, we build mobile apps by building the user interface in code. We're not using a drag and drop editor here. Instead, we're writing some code which defines what should end up on the screen. And now that we have these basics set, let's take the next step towards our first, a little bit more realistic course application.